Once upon a time, Link was on a ship sailing through the sea. Which Link is this though? Who knows, it's Link, okay? Just leave the questions for later. Anyway, he's left shipwrecked and he gets discovered lying unconscious on a beach by a pretty young girl called Marin. He's found himself on a strange island called Koholint, which has at its centre a gigantic spotted egg. What has he got himself into this time? Link's awakening was met with a lot of skepticism when it was announced. After the amazing Link to the Past, how could Miyamoto and his team possibly hope to do the series justice on a tiny little black and white screen? Okay, well, I'm playing it in colour, but that's because I got the remake. As it turns out, people back in 1993 were amazed to discover that not only was Link's Awakening a good little version of its Super Nintendo brother, it was a really good Zelda game, full stop. What I love is that it's got a personality all of its own. It doesn't just copy the bigger games, it creates its own strange little universe that sets it apart from the others. So, when Link finally awakens, his first task is to get his sword back. There it is. Once you find it, the adventure can begin. Koholint Island is a surprisingly huge place with lots and lots of secrets to discover and lots of strange and amusing characters. Take Ulrira for example. He'll give you hints if you call him on the telephone, but if you go to his house and talk to him face to face, you discover that he's actually socially awkward and can't talk very well. There's funny little characters like this all over the island. In particular, who can forget the fact that Link can actually steal something in this game? If you manage to run out of the store without paying, you might feel a little rush of adrenaline, but just don't go back to the scene of the crime. There's also a strange amount of Mario references in this world. The observant player will also recognise Princess Peach, Wart, Chain Chomps, not to mention the Goombas and Thwomps and Piranha Plants and all the other Mario baddies that Link finds when he goes underground, and the game becomes a kind of 2D platformer. And is that Kirby? If you couldn't tell, Link's Awakening is a lighter toned Zelda game. Nothing's taken too seriously. Amongst all of the weirdness, there's also some returning elements of Zelda 3. For example, the heart pieces, as well as the shovel, the hook shot, and all the other Zelda-ish things. In the later stages of the game, Link finds an ocarina, which he can learn different songs to play on. That concept certainly returned in later games. As with all the best Zeldas, there's never any shortage of things to do. If you're stuck in a dungeon, just leave it for a while and spend some time doing one of the many side quests, including a long and involved trading quest that ends with a fantastic boomerang, which is much better than the Link to the Past version. It can turn sparks into fairies, very useful. There's also secret seashells hidden all throughout the island, and if you can find 20 of them, your sword gets an upgrade. Definitely worthwhile. The dungeons, the heart of any Zelda game, start off pretty basic, hardly taxing for a series veteran, but they steadily get more complicated. And by the end, there were a few times I was left scratching my head in confusion, even though I've finished this game a number of times before. The bosses, I'm sad to say, are generally pretty uninteresting and easy to beat. Overall, the gameplay, especially for a Game Boy game, is extremely tight. Link feels great to control. There's a bit of a throwback to the very first Zelda game in that the whole island is split up into single screen blocks, which works well for the Game Boy. The only problem I have with the gameplay is the constant swapping in and out of items. Because the poor old Game Boy only had 2 face buttons, you had to repeatedly reorganise your items to the buttons, which becomes tedious really quickly. It's a pain, but there wasn't really any other way around it, I suppose. Did you know that there is actually no Zelda at all in this Legend of Zelda game? Kinda makes the title seem a bit dumb, doesn't it? The aim of this game isn't to save the princess, but to awaken the island's deity, which is known as the Windfish. Apparently, that's the only way that Link can leave the island and go home. He'll have to collect a bunch of instruments, and then play them in front of the giant egg to smash a hole in it and wake the fish up. Yeah, I know, I don't get it either. The ending is really bittersweet. Even though you get rid of the nightmares that had invaded the Windfish's dream, by awakening it, you completely erase Koholint Island and everybody on it, since they were all part of its dream. They just cease to exist. It's a bit sad that everyone who helped Link and became his friend has to die just because he wants to go home, but that's the way it has to be. There's an earlier scene in the game where Link shares a quiet moment with Marin on the beach. I think this is the first time in the entire series that a character showed their feelings. It's a sweet little scene, made funny because Marin wonders why Link isn't responding to her thoughts. Apparently she hasn't yet realised that Link can't talk. It has been a few years since I last played through Link's Awakening, and I found that my memories of the game kind of blurred with Oracle of Seasons and Ages since they effectively look the same. In comparison though, this game feels much more light-hearted, it's a bit sillier. There's no doubt that Link's Awakening stands the test of time. Sadly, that's the last Legend of Zelda game in the year of retro gaming. The next one, Ocarina of Time, was still another 5.5 years away, so farewell Link. I'll see you next month in Skyward Sword, hey? Darkwing Duck was apparently a Disney cartoon that had a moderate run in the early 90s. I'd say it must have been a spin-off of DuckTales since Launchpad is on the box. Anyway, there was an NES game made by Capcom, and I'd heard that it's a little bit like DuckTales and Mega Man, so I knew that I would have to play it this year. It does feel a little bit like DuckTales, but it doesn't have the big open maps. The levels are completely linear, more like Mega Man. And it does have a bit of a Mega Man vibe to it. The gameplay is fairly tricky and sometimes unforgiving, but the more you play the levels, the more familiar and easy they become. It also has a level select, but there doesn't seem to be any advantage of doing one level over another, so the order doesn't really matter. I am Darkwing Duck, he says at the start of every life, and then you'll die, and he says, I am Darkwing Duck. And then you die again. He says, I am Darkwing Duck. No, we know you are Darkwing Duck. Your name's on the box. As far as weapons go, Darkwing has a basic gas gun, which is much like Mega Man's arm cannon. He can collect different gas canisters though, which have limited ammo but do different types of shots. It's worth knowing what each type does so that you can use it to your best advantage, but you can only hold one special weapon at a time. The arrow gas, which was probably my favourite, acts as both a weapon and a platform, much like the super arrow in Mega Man 5. One of Darkwing's main abilities is grabbing onto things. He can grab all kinds of platforms and hooks, and this is a main feature in all of the levels. As entertaining as Darkwing Duck is, there's no denying that it's short. 7 levels is all you get. I suppose it's about the same size as DuckTales, but it's nowhere near the size of a Mega Man game. Once I got the hang of it, I finished it pretty darn quickly. It's strange and kinda awesome that a game like this was released on the 8-bit Nintendo when almost everything else had migrated up to the new system over the previous year. I suppose it was an easy and cheap way to release a game, since the templates were pretty much already there. Look, it's hardly my favourite Capcom platformer, but Darkwing Duck still plays pretty well, and holds up as an entertaining game. Next week, Jurassic Park and Luna. Smell you later. Peace out.